I think. Great, wow, look at this. Thanks for coming out, y'all. James is saying, at the Houston Institute, they consider the best way to live. What better way to live than to come read poetry on a Friday night, right? Y'all have already figured it out. Thank you, James. That was such a lovely introduction. And thanks to the Houston Institute for having me, and Rice University. I'm really, really pleased to be here. So James had mentioned that some of the students had been reading poems from Greek and Latin that are in this book. And so I thought, as a sort of theme organizing the stuff tonight, most of the poems will have a kind of classical inflection in one way or another. But hopefully they will still be pretty available, accessible. So I'll start with a poem from my first book. The poem is called Xenia. It's an important poem for me because at the center of all the work that I do, whether as a poet or a translator or a critic or a teacher or anything else, is this concept of xenia. So xenia is an ancient Greek word that means hospitality, especially hospitality toward the stranger, right? And in our time, Americans all know its opposite, its antonym, which is xenophobia, fear of the stranger, but not many people know xenia, which is proper relationship to the stranger. We need to welcome the stranger. In fact, that's the lesson taught by most of the works of classical literature, as well as by things like the Bible. So an important concept, welcoming the stranger. So this is a poem called Xenia. One day, a silent man arrives at your door in a threadbare suit, outdated and black, like a lost mourner or a Bible salesman who's been robbed. Penniless, he needs a place to stay. And you, magnanimous you, soon find the stranger reading in your chair, eating your cereal, drinking your tea, or standing in your clothes at the window, awash in afternoon's alien light. You tire of his constant company. Your floorboards creak with his shuffling footfalls, haunting dark rooms deep in the night. You lie awake in blackness, listening, cursing the charity or pride that opened up the door for him, and wonder how to explain yourself. He smells like durian and smoke, but it's mostly his presence, irksome, fogging the mind up like breath on a mirror. You practice cruelty in a mirror, then practice sympathetic faces. You ghoul, your cunning can't deceive you. You are afraid to call your friends for help, knowing what they would say. It's just you two. You throw a fit when he sneaks water into the whiskey bottle, then make amends. You have no choice except to learn humility, to love this stranger as yourself, who won't love you or ever leave. James mentioned the dog poem, so maybe I'll say that one. So I'm a big lover of dogs. You have dog people? Come on. All right, dog people. All right, yeah. So I'm a big lover of dogs, and I wanted to write a poem for a dog, and because I'm great with titles, I called it For a Dog. I have to tell you about titles. Every time I write a book, and you go on Amazon, you see if somebody's got your title, and there's always like a bunch of teenage vampire romances with my titles. So I have to go back and change them. This is how bad I am with titles. Obviously, For a Dog. Oh, For a Dog. In any case, For a Dog. You'd wake us up. That shrill, insistent bark, driving away whatever dreams had fogged our vision. And we'd rise in the true dark, wondering just what exactly cataloged by canine instinct under threat, was there. What jogger, cat, or dog it was that dogged you from your drowse beside the easy chair and summoned your yapped pandemonium. 9 times in 10, it was just empty air. Some ghosted scent you sniffed. Dumb. You're dumb. Like all dogs, snuffling up to snakes, afraid of mice. When we said, come, you wouldn't come. You capered when commanded to play dead. And when we wanted most to be alone, you'd offer up that imbecilic head until we crowned your pity with a bone. Our lives took on the shape you spun from need, the harried rondure of routine. You're gone, the house is quieter, and we've been freed forever from the never-ending chores your tale entailed. The scrubbing where you peed, the hunting stain removers down in stores. What's hardest are the peaceful hours we wanted so much, when you were scratching up the doors and howling at some phantom thing that haunted the world without, some threat we couldn't see that you were desperate to have confronted. Now, you're part of that present unity of absences the living move among, in which what was, what will, and what can't be dance in a ring to a triumphant song we don't have ears to hear or heart to see, who sleep now perfectly and much too long. So, James might should have warned y'all. On the back of this first book, Rosanna Warren, my great friend, started a blurb by saying, Ryan Wilson is a poet of nightmares. I still haven't made a business card with that on it, but I need to, right? I mean, that's just pretty cool. You know, poet of nightmares. What do you do? I'm a poet of nightmares. So some of the poems can be a little grim. The poems that I'm going to read now are from the first section of this first book, which has as its epigraph the great line from Book 6 of Virgil's Aeneid, Tende banque manus ripae ulteriori amore. They reached out their hands in love for the far shore. So the characters in these poems are, in certain ways, seeking out their own death. And the book moves toward a more joyful vision, but it starts a little grim. So I wanted to start with one of these poems. It's called Beatus Ille. I mentioned, there's going to be a sort of classical motif, Greek and Latin, coming through all of these poems. Beatus Ille is happy that one. Blessed is he. Something like that would be a good translation. It's a frequent motif in ancient works. It's in the Bible. Beatus Ille, I took the title really just from Horace's second epode, but the makarismos motif, to use the Greek, goes back to the Iliad in Book 5. So thinking about what is happiness, right? This is a great question that the Houston Institute is dealing with. This is a version of happiness that is maybe not great, but Beatus Ille. He's happiest on weekends in the fall, those quiet afternoons of chilly light. He's sure no one will call. And in the leaves' kaleidoscopic swoons, he lets the drowsy hours drift away. Brief swirls of gold and umber wheel past the deck, where he devotes the day to cultivating an observant slumber, untroubled by his work's insistent claims on his attention, or his wife away on business, or the games on TV, young men running up the score desperately. There's no party to attend, no need for artifice. He doesn't have to lie to console a friend. or give his cheek to a pretended kiss, or feign an interest in political twaddle. For once, he feels he's free. So he presses his warm lips to a bourbon bottle and, reminiscing, wanders aimlessly out through the yard, the blue-black night's cool air, savoring every sip among the dead leaves drifting here and there, the half moon smiling like a sunken ship. I don't normally say that one, but I kind of like it. Maybe it doesn't. Here's one that I haven't said in 15 years. And the reason is it's a villanelle. And poets can be infuriating because they're always perpetrating villanelles. And they need to be stopped. But in this one case, I could not stop it. In fact, the entire poem, this is my excuse, it came to me in a dream, and I just woke up and wrote it down. So don't blame me, blame the dream. In any case, the title of the poem actually points toward the Greek poet Sappho, the greatest of the ancient Greek lyric poets from the 6th century BC on the Isle of Lesbos. Sappho had a crush on a young lady named Anactoria, and we'll look at a poem from Sappho about Anactoria in a few minutes. So I just stole that character. Anactoria is somebody that Sappho had a crush on and couldn't get. So this is a poem, and I apologize for it being a villanelle. It's the only one I'll ever write. I'm done with the form. Anactoria. After you die, who will remember you, love to pass summer evenings in the shade? The lindens green along the avenue, dancing to all the old songs like they're new, teasing boys, sipping a spiked lemonade. After you die, who will remember you take home the cute ones and their girlfriends too? Lovers behind you, strung in sad parade. The lindens green along the avenue as if they never had a thing to do but shimmer resolutely, unafraid. After you die, who will remember you? You watch day break and weep at the bruised blue of the horizon till the sun's displayed the lindens, green along the avenue. Days fail, loves pass. We move on with the new. Then it's the endless field where roses fade. We are the dust. No one remembers you. And the lindens, still green, all down the avenue. Not the happiest poem, I mean, it's just... so with that in mind, maybe I'll just segue over to Sappho's poem, or my translation of Sappho's poem, about Anactoria. Very famous, and so it's a fragment. We only have one poem that is plausibly whole from Sappho. There was another that was discovered in Egypt about 10 years ago. It is now thought to be spurious. Think of that. A poem that had been missing for thousands of years just turns up in Egypt. Like, that's pretty cool. You know how her poems were preserved? Get this. Okay, how do we have Sappho's poems? She was so popular in antiquity, right, that, I mean, there were just copies everywhere. All kinds of papyrus is just covered with Sappho's poems. She was so famous, they called her the 10th muse, right? There are the 9 muses who inspired, they called her the 10th one. She was that good. So, anyway, there were so many copies that when they were wrapping up mummies, they would use this parchment that had Sappho's poems on there. And that's how we have most of the stuff that we have from her, is from parchment that was used to wrap mummies. How cool is that, y'all? All right. Some of y'all are into it, right? It's cool. Okay. So this one begins, Phainatai moi kenas Isas te wasi. So this is a really daring poem. Isas te wasi. It means equal to the gods. In antiquity, you didn't want to say somebody was equal to the gods, or they're probably going to get hit with a thunderbolt real quick. That was just not a good idea. But she's very brazen here in praising, at the start of this poem, not Anactoria, whom she loves, but Anactoria's boyfriend. Because he's got Anactoria and she doesn't. There was a country song that did something like this about 10 years ago where it was a girl like saying that she liked this other girl because the girl had the boy that she wanted. So similar kind of move. Okay, I can't remember what that was. I don't listen to contemporary country music. Oh, anyway, Sappho 31. He looks to me to be the God's own peer. That fellow there who, face to face with you and hearing your sweet speech, while sitting near you, listens to you laugh erotically, which, I swear, makes the heart within my rib cage leap and flutter. The briefest glimpse of you, and speech forsakes what I would utter. A silence holds my tongue. Delicate fires up underneath my skin, then swiftly rush. My eyes see nothing more. Hearing expires in a roaring hush. Icy sweat covers me, and tremors rattle my limbs. Then, pale green as grass on the heath in wintertime, I look to be but little shy of my death. It's crush. I love in 31, so in Greek there are two words for heart, right? One is thyrmon, and she's going to use that in the poem I'm about to read. But in 31, that heart within her ribs, she uses cardion, which is like, it gets at the muscularity of the heart. It's a very physical heart and not like the Valentine's Day kind of hearts with chocolates in them, like that. It's a very muscular, physical poem, 31. All right, so thought I would read the only poem that we believe is full or complete that we have from Sappho. It was preserved by the great Dionysius of Halicarnassus, who was a Greek historian, and he just liked the poem so much he wrote it down in one of his books, and that's why we have it. So this one begins, Poikilothron Athenat Aphrodita. So it's a prayer to Aphrodite, and it's maybe important to know in this how the ancients prayed, right? So you would have a statue, you would have like an icon, right? So there'd be a big statue of Venus or Aphrodite, as the Greeks call it. And the sculptors, the ancient sculptors, made the mouths of these figures in such a way that if you're looking up at them and you close your eyes and you look down and you look back up, the statues seem to smile. It's called the archaic smile. So there's going to be something of that happening here. She's praying to Aphrodite because Sappho is again in love. And significantly, a couple of other things. Sorry, I'm just nerding out. Don't get that. The verb, the mood of the verbs shifts in this poem really significantly from the subjunctive to the indicative. So it's as if this kind of hypothetical just comes to life and becomes real. And then, as I was mentioning before with James, in a certain way, this poem adumbrates one of my favorite songs from the 1980s, Pat Benatar's Love is a Battlefield. I don't know if we have fans of great Pat Benatar, but the last line of this poem is Symmachos eso. Be my, we don't have a word for Symmachos, it would be like ally, but it means like in a battle. Machia is war, and Sim is with, so like be my fight wither. Pretend I never said that. So this is Sappho's prayer to Aphrodite. O Aphrodite, on your dappled throne, Zeus's girl child, who plies a braided art, I pray, do not with such grief trample down, immortal queen, my heart. But come here, now. If ever in the past you heard my voice far off cry out your name, and from your father's golden rooms at last took leave, and yielding came with chariot yoked, beautiful to the eye, swift sparrows, their wings whirring as they go, brought you from heaven, down through the mid-sky, over black earth below, and soon arrived. And you, O blessed one, a smile on your immortal face, asked me what wrong it was this time that had been done me, and what caused my plea, and just what in my crazy heart I longed for most. Whom then shall I persuade this time to lead you back into her thoughts? Who's wronged you, Sappho, with some crime? If now she flees from you, soon she'll pursue. If she won't take gifts, soon she'll give them free. And if she does not love, she will love you, even unwillingly. Come to me now, once more, and extricate me from this crushing grief. What I long for, deep in my heart, fulfill, and be my great ally throughout this war. So the Roman poet, greatest of the Noi Poeti, new poets, Catullus, was a great admirer of Sappho. And that little number that I started with for Anactoria, 31, he actually translated in his Carmina as 51. So I thought I would say a couple of poems from Catullus. I'll say some of the nicer ones. Some of them couldn't be said in public. They're filthy. You may be thinking, young people like Latin is old and boring and stuffy. Oh, there's stuff in Catullus that you wouldn't say in front of anybody. But I'll say one of the sweet ones. One of the most popular poems in the Renaissance. Vivamus et amemus. Let us live and let us love. They're great English poems based on this motif by Thomas Campion, Ben Jonson, John Donne, Robert Herrick, Christopher Marlowe, Sir Walter Raleigh. Everybody loved this poem, and everybody was doing a version of it, right? But here's the thing. Okay, so this is Carmina 5. Let us, my Lesbia, live. Oh, I should have said. So Catullus, he's having an affair with this lady, Clodia Metelli, right? Married lady, she's married to like a high-powered politician guy, and Catullus is, he's a crummy poet man, but he's got this powerful lady, and they have a very tempestuous relationship, and he gives her a pseudonym in his poems. He calls Clodia Metelli, he calls her Lesbia in honor of Sappho, who was from the Isle of Lesbos, right? Okay. So let us, my Lesbia, live, and let us love. And let us set the price at 1 red cent for all those nosy codgers gossip of. Suns may set, and then rise from their descent. For us, though, when the quick light has descended, the night is an uninterrupted sleep. Give me 1,000 kisses, then 100, another 1,000, and a second 100, and a quick 1,000, and 100 more, and when the thousands finally have ended, let's cook the numbers so we can't keep score, so they're not tainted by some green-eyed creep counting up all the kisses in our store. I got to explain the green-eyed creep. How did I leave this out? This is Malocchio. Y'all know about Malocchio? The evil eye? Oh my goodness, right? So there's on the back of your dollar bill right now, there's the eye of Fatima, right? Which is to protect your money. So if Malocchio sees your money, you don't lose it. The idea was with Malocchio that if somebody saw what you had, you would lose it, right? So if you got your money out and somebody casts the evil eye on it, you're gonna lose it. So that's the green eye of envy that's Malocchio there. That's a fun superstition, isn't it? All right, and I think James asked me also to say maybe a couple from the Anacreontia. So y'all don't know Anacreon, the 3rd century poet from Chios. but you do know a song related to it. So in England, you know those stuffy Brits, right? All the guys forever, they had like gentlemen's clubs or whatever, and they would go, I don't know, drink sherry and whatever that kind of thing was. So one of the clubs there in the 18th century was called the Anacreontia Club, after this poet Anacreon. And so the guys go there and, I don't know, they wear monocles and top hats and they get boozier, they do whatever they do. But they had a song, right? Because if you're gonna have a bunch of guys getting together and getting boozy, they're gonna have a song. And so they had a song, and you actually know the song, or you know the melody of it. It's the melody of the Star-Spangled Banner. That's right, our country's national anthem is a drinking song. Just saying. And so, with that in mind, it's only appropriate that I read this poem from the Anacreontia 21 to the moralists. The black earth drinks the rain and dew, and then the trees drink them in too. The sea drinks streams, the sun, the sea, the moon, the sunlight. Why fight me, dear friends, if like them I should think it's natural to take a drink? Cool? So Anacreon of Teos was a poet of wine and ladies. It seems like he would have been fun at parties. So maybe I'll say two more from him. So we've just met Aphrodite. We're going to encounter here her child, Cupid. Right? Y'all know Cupid. Cupid here is just called love. Okay. It happened once, love failed to see in a rosebush a slumbering bee, which gave his fingertip a sting. The bower rang with his blubbering, and half on foot and half in flight, he bounded to bright Aphrodite, sobbing, "Oh, mother, I am dying, for I've been bitten by the flying snake the farmers call the bee." She said, "If you're in agony, my love, what suffering do you suppose you put your victims through?" It's cute, right? It's light, it's fun. Love this stuff. Okay. That's probably enough. You buy the book if you like this. There's a bunch of them in there. So I'll say just a few from the new book in Ghostlight. So the first one that I'll say, you don't need much background. You need to have seen the movie Top Gun. The original, everybody's seen Top Gun, right? Kenny Loggins, Highway to the Danger Zone. That's an important, it's just a great song. It's the song of the 80s. And we need to know about where the word tragedy comes from. We use tragedy all the time. We're not really sure what it means. Tragedy in its roots is from tragos, meaning goat, and oide, meaning sing. It's a goat song. Tragedy is a goat song. Why on earth? What does that mean? So, how that happens is when drama is invented in Athens at the celebration for Dionysus, the fertility god, the first plays are being staged. The winner, those plays, by the way, they were poems, they were sung, right? And the actors were up on like these big boots, like David Bowie in the 70s, like these huge high-heeled things, and their boot. Anyway, but the winner of the competition, all these people would write plays, and the winner won a goat, and so it's a goat song. That's why it's tragic. So you need to know that because this poem is called "The Birth of Tragedy." Funny story. I wasn't able to walk upright on my own too long before I found myself possessed by an urge to go outside and play. One rule, stay in the yard. So I'd twirl myself dizzy and fall, lisp Highway to the Danger Zone, roll down the hill like a barrel, or teeter clapping at lightning bugs. But in the yard I'd stay. What a good boy am I'd think. Jack Horner was good, not mean like that snot Georgie Porgy. Then, one day, the sky was wolves, and the faraway pines were smoky. And I was bad and alone. At first, my wooden rifle blew bad men without faces to smithereens in a petulant orgy of deathless death. And then I saw the farmhouse down the road by the pines, and I was gone. October, and the field, wild with broom and cares, was a harmonious bronze sea, inwoven with quick patterns by slithering winds. I stumbled toward the happy white house on the remote hilltop, brandishing my toy. Arriving, though, I found porch steps broken, windows missing, and darkness inside. Sensing a coven of witches might be in there waiting, watching, I scared, turned. Bah! Face to face with a goat, I leapt from the porch and made the dirt road, running all the way home and filling the gray sky with shrieking and terror, the goat chasing and tears, and no one could hear me or help me not die. It's a true story, as they say. But I wanted to blend it with the actual birth of tragedy. And so there's even like leaving the yard. You'll know hubris, right? You've studied tragedy, you learn about hubris. Hubris is actually a metaphor. Hubris is the name of a rock formation off of Athens, beyond which to sail was crazy, because you're going to drown out in the open sea, right? So anyway, I'm going on again. You'll get the picture. Okay. How are we doing on time, James? Maybe one more, two more? I was going to do a long one, but I won't, because I've done enough Greek and Latin, I think. Maybe I'll do, since James, you mentioned the baseball play, maybe I'll do that. We have baseball players? Anybody like baseball anymore? A couple of us, we're tolerating baseball. Okay, I know the Astros, they didn't win it all this year. Y'all have been spoiled. So I was a ball player, and, I wasn't bad. This is a poem about a friend of mine from Little League. And in Little League, did you play Little League? Show me your hand. Softball, baseball, Little League. Oh, man. I'm starting a Little League for us right now. We're gonna go practice. Get your gloves. Okay, anyway, in Little League, the biggest thing you could do was hit a home run over the fence, right? If you hit a home run over the fence, you were immortal for that entire Saturday. By the next Saturday, people didn't, but that whole day, people were buying you slushies and giving you Big League Chew and like hot dog. It was incredible. And so I was always a bigger guy, and people expected me to hit the ball a long way, even though I didn't very often. But I had a friend. I had my great friend, Jay Mills. He was a little guy. And one Saturday, it was magical. I mean, he rarely hit it out of the infield. But one Saturday, the cosmic tumblers fell into place. An enchantment fell on the field, and a fastball went right down the middle and went over the fence. Jay hit it over the fence. Everybody lost their mind. It was amazing. So that's sort of what this poem is about. So it starts in D.C. at Catholic University, where I taught for 14 years. The poem is called Next Up. 1,000 miles and 20 years away from you. Light years, it seems. Before my class starts, one gusty early April day, I watch the phalanxes of students pass, hurrying through spectral clouds of their hot breaths. Some slapping fives, some reveling in crass jokes, others shouting out youth's shibboleths. Passionate, awkward, silly, as we were. They rushed to kill exams and to their deaths, the way that people do. Days, weeks, months blur. Hours chase each other round and round the clock. And years thumb through a lifetime's calendar like an old Yellow Pages just to chuck it out. Someday, these students may be feeling what I do now, that mere survival's luck. watching the year's first cherry blossoms reeling through the spring's glacial air, pale galaxies, revolutions, and fast forward, huge gusts wheeling phantom flotillas into maelstrom seas. Not everyone has had the luck I've had. I see you and your friends, the fake IDs I got you, and you wanted them so bad. Lord, you were proud and happy with your beer at 18. And I see your tough guy dad weeping beside your coffin the next year. I glimpse us playing catch, just little kids, wincing, Saturday's brush-stroked sky sincere. Or racing through the twilight katydids pulsing, or stealing off into the woods to smoke and brag. Whatever age forbids, we sprinted after, like Earth's only goods. So young, we dreamed only of being older. While your dad, a good man, roofed our neighborhoods, we couldn't warm to homes where hopes grew colder with comfort. Friend, you've won the last of races. Kids older than you ever were now shoulder fashionable burdens. Blossoms in our faces, like ghostly avalanches, are cascading, and there you are, you're 12, circling the bases as fast as possible, the bright ball fading out of blue sky into dark trees like some untutored sun that seeks out its own shading, crowd roaring in the moment's astrodome. Brief hero, sunlight's warmth against your neck. Spring blossoms fall. It's summer. You cross home and reach out for me where I stand on deck. Say one more. That should be more than enough, probably. Talking about classics, y'all can tell I'm a nerd. So we're going to talk about nerd stuff, okay? So this last poem, the last poem in the new book, it's for a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, who about 8-9 years ago, he blacked out while he was driving. I had to go get him. Turned out he had a brain tumor. Turned out he had chronic heart failure. Turned out there were tumors all over his body, and the doctor said that they were hot, which means malignant. So it didn't seem like he had a long time, and I wrote this poem for him. So that's not the nerd part. The nerd part is I thought with my friend, in this condition, I thought, I need to write a propempticon. I know you've all said the same things many times in your own lives. I need to write a propempticon. What is a propempticon? A propempticon is a poem for someone going on a journey, right? The most famous in antiquity is Horace's Ode 1-3 for his great friend Virgil, who was going on a journey. So, a propempticon. And then, because I'm the nerd that I am, I said, well, I also have been wanting to write a preamel. Again, you've said this all many times yourself, you want to write a preamel. Preamel is another ancient genre where you're listing, some people like this, some people like the other, I like this. So, in any case, I joined those two together, and you really don't care about any of that, so I'm going to get into the poem. It's an airplane poem. That's a propempticon, so it's a poem for a journey. It's called The Problem. Some grouse. Some rattle ice in stormy cocktails. Some read or stare into their hands' artificial glow. The good-natured, whom no one likes, make conversation. Kids kick seat backs. Babies scream. This is the part where you find out exactly who you are, as much as you will ever know, crammed like seeds into this invaluable lemon with all the dreamed escapes you cannot help but dream. There's something wrong, some unspecified glitch, but nobody will say just what it is, keeping you stranded among strangers here on the hot tarmac, waiting. waiting for some pronouncement, some true words that will explain your prolonged absences from the air above the clouds, from flight, from the oceanfront destination everyone's anticipating. It will not last forever, your time on the ground. At some point, there will come a departure. Then, clouded skies will recede, like sunshine, like questions, like your toddler's sticky touch. And you will be wholly invisible to the earthlings you love, who love you. An arrow shot by some blind archer beyond the endless traffic and grocery store pharmacy lines, long-distance calls and doctors wincing thoughtlessly. For now, take solace in the presence of the known world's flawed, forgettable, flightless things. Bless the engine's troubled heart, the brief and inexplicably beautiful problem with the wings. Thanks.
Probably have just a few more minutes for the questions, so you got it.
I like that. Feel free to keep going. That was great. Way to go, y'all. Thank you. Thank you so much. Questions?
You paint beautiful pictures.
Oh, thank you so much. Ut pictura poesias, in poetry as in painting, very related arts. Yes, ma'am.
How do you refine your poems? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Because there's so many, so I'm not sure different processes, but like, when I ask this, what do you think of?
Yeah, almost always I start with an image. So I keep a bunch of notebooks. You get the sense I'm pretty much a nerdy guy that does that kind of thing. But there's, one is images, and I'm always trying to find images. So in the Beatus Ille poem that I said for y'all, the half moon smiling like a sunken ship, right? So the half moon's normally sort of vertical, but this one time it was horizontal, and I thought, well, it's kind of like a smile, and then also it kind of looks like a ship at the bottom. Anyway, so I tried to put that in about 50 different poems, and they were all dreadful. And I just kept trying to, what does this mean? How do I put it in a context? And so it almost always starts with some image that stands out to me, and then meditating on that and trying to inhabit that vision. And as in meditation, I start trying to move around in the scene and analyze what I see there and its significance so that I can at once describe things literally in a way that everybody can understand, but also in such a way that they have a verticality or they have a symbolic significance beyond themselves. And so it's about seeing, generally through memory, and then analyzing, and then thinking, well, what does this want to be? And most of the time it doesn't want to be anything. I am really slow. Talking about composition, I'm really slow. My new poem that just came out in First Things last month took 8 years, and it's 14 lines long. So my composition is really slow, but it's almost always starting with observing something and then thinking, what does this want to be? And my poems are really not about me. They're about what an experience I think wants to be, or an image I've seen or love wants to be. So it's not a great answer, but maybe that's all I can do for now. Thank you. That's so nice. Yeah.
Have you ever had a poem completely change meaning for you? And what is your favorite instance of that?
Completely change meaning for me? Not completely. Usually, right, the poet needs to be very conscious of some things, primarily technical things, craft, and needs to be unconscious of some other things. But really, you want to have a pretty good idea of what you're doing. But I'll say that I have been surprised by correct observations that people have made about poems of mine that I hadn't seen before. Because I take so long to write, and I take so long before I publish anything, I normally know it inside out before. And so an example, in the first book, in The Stranger World, there's a long poem called Authority. Um, it's a spooky poem. Anyway, my friend Rosanna, after she had read it, wrote to me and said, hey, I really like your take on Robert Browning's My Last Duchess. And I was like, dang it, it is like Robert Browning's My Last Duchess. How did I not know that? I mean, they're not exactly alike. I mean, in fact, they're quite different, but there's a similarity there. So sometimes that kind of thing will happen. But yeah, I don't know. It never completely changed me. I think it's often that when we're writing, if we're doing it the right way, we are moving toward the outer circles, outer rings of our being, where we are uncertain. We're moving into a place of uncertainty. And so often, we're not quite sure what something means until years later. It'll come clear to us after we've moved on from that place in our life, when we've understood that place in our life. Henry James, in his great story, The Middle Years, says something like this, that the main character, the main character is always a writer or an artist in Henry James, but he's a writer or an artist, and he's saying exactly, I had this story, everybody liked it, and then, 4 years later, I kind of know what it's actually about. So there are things like that. Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie.
Okay, so you keep referring to how long it takes you
Mm-hmm.
to write a poem and to collect them.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to us about that? In that, why and how do you live with yourself with it taking that long?
Miserably.
It started that way or did it evolve? Like, I'm really curious about your process, and also because like you have a brilliant mind and you just come up with this stuff, and yet is it ever perfect, or is that the point?
Well, obviously, anything that I publish is perfect and has no flaw, whatever. Clearly, I don't know whether. No, it's slow. It wasn't always slow, Stephanie. When I was very young and I was starting out and I didn't know what I was doing, I'd write 3 or 4 poems a day because I didn't know what I was doing, and that's great. That's great. You need to write, I think, several thousand bad poems. At least I needed to write several thousand bad poems before I could write one that was half decent. In the same way that, right, if you want to be a basketball player and you go out on the hoop in the driveway when you're 5 years old, you're not going to be shooting from the logo like Steph Curry and doing shimmies. You're going to be airballing it from right in front of the rim, right? It's going to take a lot of misses before the ball starts going in. Same thing. So it started changing in my mid-20s when I started translating seriously from the Roman poet Horace and the French poet Charles Baudelaire, and translating them in order to attempt a translation in a meaningful sense, where it wasn't like an exercise in a language class and you're saying, well, this is what it literally means, but like, how's the poem working? It made me read a poem in a way that I had never done before. And I thought, in fact, I already had a master's degree from Johns Hopkins when I started this, and I was like, oh, I've never read a poem before. Oh, okay. And then trying to capture what I could from them and spreading out, translating more broadly and studying, the great writers across cultures and languages and times and seeing what they have in common. It puts a lot of pressure on you as a poet. When you really see what Horace is doing, or Baudelaire, or Sappho, or Rilke, or something, you can't just slop some stuff down on the page anymore. And so things started slowing down, and I started figuring out my process, which involves, as I say, keeping just a bunch of notebooks and giving things time to develop. Horace says in the Ars Poetica, the Epistle to the Pisos, he says you should put a poem in 9 years, put a poem in a drawer for 9 years before you publish it. And see, I'm a speed demon. You think I'm slow. It only took me 8 years, Stephanie. Kick rocks, Horace. I put a poem out in 8 years. So I think it's just, people that are persnickety about the craft, you want it to be as good as you can make it. You don't want to, I guess the thing I want to say is you want to honor the reader. You want to make it always worth the reader's time, the audience's time, so that it's pleasurable and it can be, enjoyed on the first reading, but you can also enjoy it reading it for 4 or 5 times and go back. So yeah, it's about honoring other people's time, right? I'm so honored that y'all came out here on a Friday night to listen to poetry. I mean, that's awesome. That's such an honor. I hope you feel that I didn't waste your time. I tried to give it a little something. Maybe one more, James. Do we have time? Yeah, one more. Yeah. A good poem versus a bad poem. Terrific question. I would say a good poem always has significant form. Form in Latin is forma, right? And it means beauty, right? Anything that is informis or informa has no beauty. It's ugly. It's hideous. Everything has to have a form. Now, a lot of people think that that means everything has to be in regular meter and rhyme, because I often use regular meter and rhyme, but that's not what it means. Form means that every word in the poem, every syllable really, needs to be participating in patterns. Some kind of pattern, hopefully multiple patterns at once. And the reason this has to be the case is for there to be forma or beauty, you have to have three things. You have to have integritas, you have to have wholeness, right? You have to have harmonias, you have to have all the parts working together, and you have to have claritas, you have to have radiance, right? So the radiance is contingent upon the integrity and the harmony. So everything has to work together. And that can be done in a free verse poem. It can be done in all kinds of different ways. But what makes a good poem, in fact, I think what makes a poem, I don't think there is such a thing as a bad poem. I think it's a misnomer or an oxymoron. I think what makes a poem is having this significant form, which makes it beautiful, even if it's a poem that deals with horror or great suffering. The orderliness of the form itself will ultimately subsume the pain and the horror into a vision of beauty that redeems the pain or the suffering or the horror. So, as best I can do extempore. It's a tough question. Yeah, well, thanks so much for coming, y'all. Really.